It's time to stitch the donkey and the sheep for our Nativity Stuffy set. The donkey is on page 29 and the sheep is on page 31. I have the fabrics backed with fusible interfacing and I have felt for the donkey. I also want to note that I am making 2 sets, and so I have double the amounts of fabric, and I will use one set to set aside for my scan and cut. The pieces for the back envelope as well as the pieces for the sheep that will be chenilled have not been backed with interfacing. So let's get stitching the donkey and the sheep. I've opened my USB and I'm going to select the donkey and I will hit set and embroidery. And then I'm going to go to layout and move. And I am going to just bump him to the top of the hoop. I'll select OK and then hit my minus plus needle. That's the screen I like to stitch on. And I moved him to the top because I still have my roll of stabilizer attached when I hooped for the next couple of items. And so I have some slack pulled out and I will be able to save whatever's not used. And so that's why I put it to the top as far as it could go. So the first steps on these stuffies are always the same. It will be the placement line and I will place and tack down the back fabric. So I have the tack down. I'm going to place my fabric and just make sure that it is covering all of those tack down lines. And then we can tack the background fabric down. It just ran the placement line for the mane for the donkey, and this is just going to be filled in with black. And because this is a light background, they are suggesting to use embroidery topping. And embroidery topping is just like a plastic type of product. This is not something that will be removed, and it's just so that when the black is stitched over this light background, in case there's spots in the thread that might be a little bit open, that the background won't show through. This will kind of cover up if there's any gaps. Now, with that being said, I do not have actual embroidery topping, and I didn't really want to go pay $12 for a pack of embroidery topping. I'm just guessing on the price, but I do have a plastic tablecloth from the dollar store. I'm going to try it and see. So what should happen is it gave us a placement line. I'm going to place this over that placement line, and then it's going to do the fill and fill in that whole mane. Now with embroidery topping, you should be able just to pull it away from the outline and, you know, go on. I'm going to try it with this, and hopefully this plastic tablecloth is not too different and that I'll be able to pull it away cleanly. And if not, then I guess I'll have to figure out what to do. But I'm going to try this. So I'm going to stitch the fill and let's see what happens. So I just stitched the mane and it's got such great detail. It might be hard to see, but it's, you know, kind of wavy and looks like it's just a really fun mane for this little donkey. And I want to know that you can see how big it is compared to my finger. You know, it's not very big. And that took 3 minutes to stitch out. So there is a lot of stitching. I'm not sure if this was needed, but they suggested it. I am stitching at 800 stitches per minute. So if you're stitching, you know, at the top speed, it would probably be 2 minutes, but it's pretty thick and dense. Again, I'm not sure if I would have needed that. So, but let's hope that this tears away. Oh, it looks like it's tearing away pretty good. Because it did all the stitching, and then if you notice, it does kind of a finishing outline, even more stitches, and that kind of just perforates. Wow, I'm pleasantly surprised. There's a few little things. This side, I think, is going to look like it gets covered with the donkey. The gray felt's going to be here, and so I'm not worried about this side. This side, I don't think gets covered with anything, but I'm happy with that. And considering this was a huge tablecloth for $1.25, I'm good with that. And you can see how dense it was. You can see that it's kind of puckering a little bit right here. So hopefully with the other stitching, you know, that'll get taken care of away. But just to note that there's all colors of toppings available for when you're doing things like red, or if you're doing white stitches on top of a dark fabric, they have white topping. So go try a tablecloth. It worked really good. All right, let's keep going. I do want to note something about the thread colors. In their list, they have a dark gray and a light gray, and they have a dark green and a medium green, and I am only using one green and one gray. There's a lot of colors of thread, and I just thought that I didn't need to have quite so many. And so I will be using the color that is the light gray versus the dark gray for the donkey. All right, let's continue. That is the placement, of course, for the donkey, and this is using the gray felt. Again, I have the entire piece of felt that I got in my kit. I'm not cutting it to size. I'm just going to put it in the corner. It will tack it down, and then I will trim it right next to the felt because this will have a cover stitch. This is looking so good, and I want to note a few things. I probably could have trimmed closer. You might be able to see a little bit of the felt, you know, peeking out from the decorative stitch, but donkeys are furry, so that I think just gives a little added texture, I guess. It looks great with the ears and all of the little detailing it did. And now it just did this little round placement for the muzzle. So I'm going to take my fabric and I'll just place it over. We'll tack it down and trim it. And then this other half I'm going to save and cut with my scan and cut for the second. All right, so let's get that tacked down. It just did a placement stitch for the little tail and this little piece. It's called a furlock. I just learned a new word today. This little bang, I guess it goes on a donkey. I don't know, maybe it's the same for horses or something, but that's called the furlock. And this is for the embroidery topping. So I took that piece that I used for the mane and I just cut some pieces. You can see that's where the mane was. And I need to tape these. Now, normally I just would have put a big piece. I would have, held it down and let it do the fill stitch and move on. But in this step, there's also the eyes, a couple little nostrils on the muzzle, and then it looks like some hooves down here. And so I can't just place it, probably where I normally would, because it's going to be doing other stitching. I do wish that for these two, they would have just done that a separate step so that you could not, worry about where else it's going to stitch, and then you could have pulled it away. But it's all one step, and I don't know how it's going to stitch out, in what order. So I just need to make sure that when I'm placing this, I'm covering it up, but it looks like they're down here, and I should be fine for that one. I will hold it down. Then for this one up here, it looks like the eyes are pretty close to the muzzle. So I think as long as I don't get, too close to the muzzle, that the eyes should be fine. All right, so let's stitch out the details. All right, as it moved up to these little bangs up here, my needle was right over the tape. So I stopped my machine before it started, and I am going to, now that I don't need to worry about those because those are stitched, I'm just going to place this and tape it way down here and then kind of hold on to it. All right, so then I'll just start my machine and we'll continue on. Everything's stitched out, so now I need to just pull this topping away, my little tablecloth. That looks really good. Whoops, I think you missed that. Now I do need to pick this out. I might have to get some better tweezers. These are for the jump stitches. There's a jump stitch right between his little nostrils. I'm going to go ahead and just do that while I'm here. And then with this little piece, I'm going to have to just and this little I forgot what it's called, forelock. These little bangs do go together at the bottom. All right, so that's what the tail and this little bang have the decorative stitching. I'm not sure you can see. It's kind of got like a little wave stitch, same as the mane. All right, so I think the last thing that we need to stitch out for this is the hay. It's going to be the fringe hay that is just like we did for the manger. So let's get that started. So for this next step, of course, like the manger, we have to put a water-soluble bobbin. So I've already put the bobbin in, and it's going to stitch that long, kind of irregular satin stitch that will be the fringe. Here you can see the super long satin stitches that make up this little fringe. And most of them have some on the bottom, but not all. They're all a little bit different. This one just is the top portion. And so now the next step is to tack those down. Because we had the water soluble bobbin in, if you were to dissolve that, all of the stitching would completely come out. So the very first thing that I do is automatically put my bobbin back in my little baggie. I never want to mix that up. Again, it looks kind of just like white thread, and so I always do that. So now I'll put my regular bobbin back in and we will stitch the tack down. Here are the satin stitches, this little tiny row of satin stitches that is going to hold the fringe down when we dissolve it. And so now I will just flip it over and I'm just going to start spraying. I have a towel on my wool mat and I will just start spraying so that that starts dissolving. And then I've got this cute little tool again that has kind of a small end that I will just wiggle under, and you can see how fast that starts to come up. It's so fast and easy. Now for these bottom ones, if my tool is a little bit big, I might have to go back with my seam ripper and just be super careful, of course. And I'm just kind of rocking it back and forth to lift that up. Now I need to let this dry, but I have all of the fringe pulled to the front, and the next step is going to do the placement lines for the backing, and then we'll stitch the backing on. These bottom pieces do need to be taped up because the stitching for the back is pretty close to the actual design, and so they want you to tape this fringe so it doesn't get caught. All right, so I'm going to let this dry and then we'll finish this up. It just did the placement lines to place our first piece of backing, which I have folded over and pressed 2 times on the long edge. And it does say in the directions to tape this fringe back. You can see I haven't taped it yet, and this stitch on the right caught one of these little loops, so I just had to cut it. And so I would definitely tape before even running those. So I'm just going to kind of use my tape and pull the fringe back because the stitch remember, come super close to the actual design. And so we don't want to get any thread caught in there, if at all possible. So, and I'm going to try to keep the tape out of the stitching line as well, so I don't have to try to get that out or have it in the seam. Okay, so I think that's out of the seam and it's all pulled back. So now with one of my backing pieces, I'll flip it so that the right side is down, and it's going to stitch this bottom piece first. So I will line the fold, just making sure there's about equal, amounts outside of those placement lines. And you can see it's plenty long enough. I am going to, I think, tape just the bottom, and then again up here so that the foot doesn't get caught as it's traveling by this fold. And I'll still kind of watch it and use my little stick to just make sure that that doesn't get pulled up. All right, so it's going to stitch just half of this down. I just got done stitching this, and I just want to note that I taped out here as I really wasn't paying attention. Of course, it's going to stitch this right next to the design. And so luckily I was, again, watching and made sure that that foot didn't catch under here because I hadn't taped close. And so make sure that you're, taping in the right spot. So now it's done the next two little placement lines. And so I will set the backing on with the fold next to those. So I've removed the tape from the first. I will put this again with the fold now lined up with these down at the bottom. And that one's awful close. It's pretty close up here. I think I am only going to turn this down once. So I'm going to just, the second fold, I'm just going to kind of press out. I'm not sure why. You can see how much space is down here. These are the exact same size, so I'm not sure why it is doing what it's doing. But this one that I folded once will be towards the inside when I flip it, so I'm not worried about that. Now that I have these lined up, I feel better about having this stitched down. And so again, it's going to stitch close right here. And I'm not going to tape it out here like I did last time. I'm going to make sure I tape it right over that. And now it's going to stitch this side. So it's done with the design. I'm going to pull this tape, and I can take it out of my hoop. Now, this is a little tiny area to flip out, so I'm going to be curious to see how easy it is to get this whole side out of this little tiny. It kind of would have been nice to have it this way, but anyways, I'm going to pop that out. Now, before I cut this off and start working on it, I am going to rehoop so that I can start my little sheep. I am going to let this piece hang over a little bit especially since this isn't backed. And I can leave the part that's backed and thicker right above my hoop, but that just, again, saves me some stabilizer. Not necessary. You can cut this off and completely finish that. But now I've got this, and I just have to make sure that I don't get it, flipped under when I'm putting it in, and we will start the sheep. So what I'll do is select OK so I can go home and cancel. I'll go back to my USB, and I need to find the sheep. I'll hit set and embroidery. Now you can see it's not far from the top, but I am going to go to layout and move and bump it all the way. Whoops, it went out because I don't have my hoop in. So let me go back down a little bit. And again, that shows that you can move this out of the stitching field if you don't have the actual hoop attached. So let me slide this in. And that's why you do always want your hoop in your machine when you move it, so that I can move it. I'm going to move it down and then push it. And then you can hear that knocking. And then that will not let me go outside of my hoop. All right, so now we're ready to start the sheep. So I will select OK and go to my minus plus needle. And then we will start the same steps. I'm going to do all the first same steps. It's just the placement for that background fabric. I'm going to place the background fabric and tack it down, and then we'll go from there. The next step is going to embroider the cute little feet, and then I am going to do the placement line for the wool. So it just did the placement for the body wool, and the first piece that I need to put down is the piece that has fusible interfacing on the back. This is just like a regular applique, and so I need to just cover, and it will tack it down, and then I will trim it. Now I do want to note that I find it interesting that it did the little block legs, but didn't ask for me to use the black topping like it did on the mane and other parts of the donkey. Even though this is a filled, black thread over the background, that's what the mane on the donkey was, but they had us use the toppings, in case there was any show through or if the stitches didn't cover. But it's interesting that they didn't have us do that on those legs. Didn't need it, but just interesting. All right, so I'm going to place the swirl fabric down. I have a little bit of adhesive, and it is going to tack it down, and then I will trim it. And again, it's important that you use the piece that has the interfacing on the back. We have 3 other pieces exactly the size that do not. At the beginning, when I was showing all of the fabrics that I'm using, I forgot to show F5, and this is the piece that I did not cut to size, and this is for the face. And so I just, again, have it whole, and I will just cover up the placement for the face and tack it down and trim. It just finished the little fluff on top of the head, and it did a decorative outline and some little swirls to kind of mimic the fabric. So now I need to take the 3 pieces of the swirl fabric, making sure that they're right side up. And again, these are the pieces that do not have interfacing on the back. They are just 3 plain pieces of fabric, all stacked on top of each other. And I am going to place them right over the sheep's body, and it is going to baste them down. After tacking down the 3 pieces, and that is with this, it's actually a basting stitch. It is not a normal tack down because we are going to remove this outside tack down line in just a minute. But after it did this basting line, it did some decorative swirls, and that kind of mimics the fabric, and that's going to give us a guideline on where to trim our fabric. So the directions call to trim all 3 pieces right outside of this basting stitch. Then we are going to remove the basting stitch so that we can cut these 3 pieces of fabric, and then we can chenille it, and that will make the little sheep fluffy. Now, it says after cutting and removing the basting to go ahead and draw where we're going to cut. I think it's just easier if you have a guideline to cut instead of just trying to guess when you have all your fabric pieces and there's nothing holding them down. I'm going to do that first. So if I take my book and it shows us where to draw, so I need to look at my sheep the same way. So I've turned my book, and it's basically right kind of in between all of these tack downs. So for example, this piece will be trimmed this way, and then it shows kind of a swirl. And so that is going to be right here and then kind of inside that swirl. And they want you to draw it just so that you have, again, a kind of a clear path where to cut. So I'm just going to follow this, and I am using a friction pen that's heat erasable. So I can, before I chenille it, after I cut it, I can just press it and it will get rid of this. Now, some people don't like these. They say that if it gets cold, the marks will come back. I live in a very hot state. I'm not worried about that, but it does suggest to use a water-soluble marker or marking pen. I don't happen to have one right at the moment, so I'm using this. But you decide, what you would like to mark yours with. So I am just going to mark coming down, and I don't have to have a solid line. I just need kind of a guideline of where I'm going to cut. And then it shows this little swirl that's coming inside the swirl. And then it looks like at the bottom of the ear, it comes straight down. And then it comes up to here. And then inside this little swirl. Marker isn't the best right now, it looks like. And then this kind of angles down here. Now, remember, this basting is going to be gone, and we're actually going to trim all the way to the end because we're cutting our fabric just outside of there. I'm going to see if I can get this to work or find a different pen. Okay, let's try this one. So it comes down, and this is heat erasable also. I should test it though. That would be smart. Okay. And then this looks like it actually comes all the way down. And then this little swirl just comes inside of this stitch swirl. We'll come all the way to the end. I think that's good. And then they showed a few little, it says, it's kind of hard to see. This is a tiny picture. You can see it's about as big as my fingernail. It says that there are also the chenille cut lines, which is what I just marked, and then also mark the clip lines on the curves. And so I can see barely. And so it just looks like once you cut this, anytime there's a little curve, you can clip, how you would when you're turning something, just to kind of relax that fabric and let it, kind of ease. And so it looks like they're having you clip maybe some of these. I'm just going to worry about that when I'm chenilling. And if I'm chenilling as something, maybe it's kind of a big piece that isn't fluffing up, then I might just take and do little clips. I'm not going to mark those. Plus, I can't really see them. All right, so the next thing to do is to go ahead and trim along the outside of this basting. And it's all three. I'm going to see if I can cut all three. Yeah, it's pretty easy. There are, in little dips. And so if it's easier to cut one at a time, that's fine. This is all going to get roughed up. So they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be exactly symmetrical. If you decide to cut them separately, if one's a little bit longer in a spot, it doesn't matter. We're going to rough this up. But of course, we're just trimming the outside. And again, this doesn't even have to be perfect. If you're super close one time and you can tell a little bit here, I'm not quite as close, that's okay for this, this particular one, because it's not going to have a cover stitch. So we don't have to be super precise, because again, it's not going to be covered with a satin stitch like this is, for example, where you want to make sure you're close and and don't have too much past that. This is different. Okay, so I've got that. Now I need to go ahead and take out this basting stitch that's holding that outside down. Again, if you wanted to stitch that in a darker color, if it'd be easier, you could do that. Again, this doesn't matter if you have a little bit of fraying, because we're going to fray this all up. So, you don't have to be too careful. Of course, you don't want to really poke your base fabric, but just get this stitching out. And this is why I drew my lines first. The directions say to do all this first and then draw your lines. And I just felt that it was easier when it was all tacked down and flat and smooth to go ahead and draw those lines. All right, so I'm going to finish getting that out and then we can trim on the lines. So after removing all of that outside basting stitch, I just kind of went around and folded back to make sure that, all of the edges had been removed. So you can see that it's already starting to fray, and that's why I thought it would be easier to draw the lines before doing that. So now I just need to cut on the lines. Now, when I drew these lines, of course, I didn't go all the way to the end because that stitching was there, but I do want to cut all the way to the end. So I will just start, again, not cutting into anything below. And if you end up only cutting, 2 of the fabrics, then just go back and cut your third. You just want to cut all 3, which is I think what I did here. I still have 1 to cut, but not, of course, that original applique fabric that has the backing on it. So I will just trim. So here's where I've trimmed on that line. I would, trim up, try to get under all 3 if possible. If not, that's okay. Use some small scissors. And in the tight areas, you might need to do 1 or 2 layers at a time. And you can see I didn't cut exactly on that line, and that's okay. Now I can come down this one. I'm going to cut all the way out. Looks like I didn't quite get my stitches all the way out on that basting. I can fill it. I'll go back and take those out in a minute. And then for this little curve, I'll just come in again and follow. Now this is where it says, like, if there's a curve, to go ahead and just make little cuts. I think I'm going to do that on some of the bigger ones. Then I'm going to chenille it and see if I need to go back and make more. And so you just want to make sure that you get all 3 layers and that you're down to that very base layer. And I will continue cutting all of these that we marked. Here is everything cut. I cut again along all of those lines that I drew, and I think I've cut through all 3 layers. If you're chenilling this and find out that you didn't, then you would just, recut. So the first thing I'm going to do is just put an iron over it to get rid of those marks. You can see they just disappear. Now it does say that if you use the water-soluble marker like they suggest, you can, of course, spritz it, mist it with water, and that will also help when you're kind of roughing this up and chenilling this. I have this just little chenille brush that I got from, I think, my girlfriend's quilt shop. It's just wire. And I've used a regular wire brush that I got, I think, at like Harbor Freight for, I don't know, maybe a barbecue or something. And I found that that rusted over time, especially if it gets, any moisture. And so I have this. I think these are stainless steel, if I remember right. And it's just a little brush you put on your finger and you just start just scraping. I've also used a nail file, anything to just spray this. And you know what? It just reminded me, they want us to tape over so we don't mess up this stitching. So let me get some tape. So they want you to tape over the satin stitching, and that's just, again, when you're roughing it up, you don't want to tear or, rough up that satin stitching. So I think I'm just going to get some little pieces and just tape them. And you can, again, pull this back because we took the basting stitch out. And so the stitch that holds that is way down here. And so you can, just move it back. Let me get one more piece. And this does get messy. And they want you to do it now because it's definitely easier to do it when it's flat. You can put it on a firm surface versus when you flip it inside out and have bunches of layers. And so now you could use a toothbrush. And I wonder if I'm supposed to tape the feet. I'm going to do that. I don't think it says that. Just so that I don't, again, get on those. So again, you can pull this back and you can see where the stitch the body down. I'm going to tape all the way up there so that I don't, just get any of that. And this is where, if you're roughing it up and you don't seem like it's roughing up good enough, you can come back in here and maybe notch so that it's, not one solid piece, so that they kind of just go every which way. And then you can do it as much or as little as you want. If that's how you like it, then, stop and be done with it. If you like it really fuzzy, just keep working at it. Again, they do mention you can mist with water, and they see that will help with the chenilling. And try to get, everything in between as well. You kind of just want it to all look fluffy. All right, so let me work on this for a few minutes. Okay, I think that looks pretty good, at least for now. I do have some long pieces that I'm just going to trim, the super long ones. I think that looks pretty good. Just want to give him a little fuzzy coat. Again, you can just keep doing it until it's, pretty much all down to the stitching. For now, I think that looks good. So I'm going to clean as much as I can up, and then we're ready to put the back on, and then we can finish these first two animals. hard to stop. So I dumped most of that off into the garbage, but you can see that, you know, there's a lot. So I'm just going to take the tape that I used and get as much as I can. Again, it's not that big of a deal. If you don't get it, you'll just brush it off. And I do see a few long ones. Okay, I think that's good enough. So the next step is going to run the placement lines for the backing, and we'll work on getting that finished up and get these done. So I just ran the 2 placement lines. I have the linen thread in, so it might be hard to see. I can see them. So I'll line that up. And now I am going to tape. And we can stitch. So here are the next 2 placement lines, right here and right here. So now I need to place this with the fold along those. That was close. It did kind of pull this up. It pulled the tape up and it all worked out, but that's why you've got to watch. Even when you tape, you've got to watch it. Okay, so we're done, and now let's go cut these out. So I'll cut right up next to this to, again, save any stabilizer because I do still have it attached to the roll. And then I will cut these apart. I am going to use my pinking shears. And again, cut from the back side along this outermost edge. And then I will go ahead and I'll notch on rounded parts so when I turn, because even though I'm using pinking shears, I'm not getting super close. So if you are doing something and getting super close to the seam that is going to be you know, turned and pressed out, then this is almost kind of like notching the fabric. But because I'm so far away, I still need to notch, but I am going to use these pinking shears. Oh my gosh, she's so cute. Oh, look at that fuzzy. Okay, I'm going to get my turning tool in a minute. Now this one is super little and he's got a lot going on up here. So we're going to have to work getting him, maybe press his ears down. I might have to go get my turning tool. If I can grab onto him, I can possibly pull it out, but that's pretty little. Okay, I got his ear down. sewn. So if we wouldn't have put tape, we might have gotten that fringe sewn down into that seam, which we don't want because that would defeat the purpose of having some cute fringe. Now remember, these are the medium size. You can see about how big these are. So there's a size smaller and a size larger. I think those are super cute. All right, I think I'm going to give them a quick press and then we'll get them stuffed, and I'm going to finish the backs. So I just pulled some polyfill. I just use the polyfill brand that I used to get at Joann's. I get like a 20-pound box at a time. I always got it on sale. And I just use that. I'll stuff it kind of firm, but not, you know, too firm. I think I'm going to give this little area a press. I think that's where I caught it coming up, but it looks like I might be able to get it a little flatter. And then stuff that a little bit more, but I think I'm going to go press that. And then on this donkey, I'm going to try to press that or use a pin. Let me go do that real quick. So I pressed a little bit and I think they look good. I stuffed them and now I am just going to hot glue. I decided I'm just going to hot glue the back. Most of that's going to be covered up when I put this felt on. And so I'm just going to add a little bit of hot glue at a time. I'll let that cool, and then if I need to add a few more in a few more places, then I'll add a little bit more. I'll do the same thing with this. So I'm using the small ones. And I'll just, this one looks like it's about centered, so I'll put that about where that seam is. Yeah, it pokes out just a little bit, so I think I'm going to put him more towards his neck. Trim that corner off so it didn't poke up. I think I'm going to need to bend this one back like I did the manger. So see how it's kind of leaning. Let's see if that helps. Perfect.